I always wanted to be a father, but my wife Bianca didn't want to have children so early, even though we had been married for 8 years together for over a decade. I loved her more than I could say, and I thought love would be enough. I was wrong. Now I'm the father of 2 children I never expected, and the path that led me here was anything but simple. My name is Adrian, and this is my story. It was a Friday evening, the kind of night that felt ordinary and safe. Bianca and I had been married for 8 years, together over a decade, and yet that comfortable rhythm, the one that makes a home feel like home, was fragile in ways I didn't fully understand. Tonight, we were meeting Dominic and Camila for dinner. They had been our friends for years, but recently the four of us had been seeing each other more often. Dinners, small gatherings, drinks after work. It was meant to be casual, familiar, harmless. The restaurant was warm and inviting. Candles flickered on the tables, and the scent of roasted garlic and fresh herbs filled the air. Wine glasses sparkled under the low lights. Bianca moved through it like she always did. Effortless, magnetic. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves, her elegant dress hugging her slender frame. Across from her, Dominic leaned back in his chair, muscular, confident, a little older than me, his eyes always scanning the room with an easy charm. Camila sat beside him, serene and gentle, her casual outfit softening her quiet beauty. We laughed, shared stories of our week, made jokes that only the four of us understood. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. Passing a plate of pasta, Bianca's hand brushed against Dominic's. Their fingers lingered, subtle but undeniable. Their eyes met, and in that heartbeat I saw something I couldn't define. A spark, electric and dangerous. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. It's nothing, just a touch. They're friends, but the look, the almost imperceptible smile, lingered in my mind long after the touch ended. Every time they laughed together, I felt a pang I couldn't name. I tried to focus on Camila, on the jokes she was telling, but my eyes kept returning to them. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation, laughter that felt hollow to me, and stolen glances I couldn't unsee. By the time we left the restaurant, I felt hollowed out. Something had shifted. It wasn't just the brush of hands. It was the subtle, quiet electricity that passed between them. Something I couldn't reach. Something I couldn't touch. I walked home with Bianca beside me, her hand in mine. Yet I felt more alone than I had in years. The following weeks were a blur of social engagements. We as couples began meeting almost every week. Sometimes it was dinner, sometimes gallery visits, sometimes just drinks after work. It was meant to be friendly, casual, but I couldn't ignore the small changes. Bianca and Dominic seemed to find excuses to talk privately. A shared laugh over a piece of artwork, a discussion about an upcoming gallery event, a joke about something only they understood. I watched quietly, noticing the way her eyes would light up when he spoke, the way his attention lingered on her more than on the room. I told myself it was normal. Friends get along, people share interests, but a subtle tension had begun to creep into our interactions. When we were all together, I could feel the invisible current between them, a magnetic pull I didn't belong to. One evening at a small wine bar we all liked, I watched as Bianca leaned closer to Dominic while explaining an idea for a new exhibition. Her hand brushed his again, fleeting but deliberate. He smiled, a private, warm smile meant only for her. I forced myself to look elsewhere, to sip my wine and make polite conversation, but inside I felt a quiet tightening in my chest. Even outside these meetings, the pattern continued. Bianca would talk about Dominic's idea or Dominic said in ways that seemed innocent, but the inflection in her voice made my stomach twist. I found myself replaying conversations in my mind, analyzing every glance, every laugh, every accidental touch. At night, I lay awake wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe I was imagining it, reading too much into casual interactions. But deep down, I knew the spark I had seen at dinner was growing. It wasn't just a look or a touch anymore. It was an undercurrent, quiet but persistent, weaving itself through our shared lives. And I, Adrian, who had always internalized my emotions, who had always been passive, felt powerless. I wanted to confront her, to ask her to stop, but a part of me hesitated. I wanted certainty before speaking. I wanted to be sure. Little did I know, the certainty I craved was already forming, hidden in glances, lingering touches, and the slow, undeniable pull between Bianca and Dominic. It started innocently enough, or at least I tried to believe it did. Bianca had been asked to help organize a small art event for a mutual friend, and Dominic offered to help her from the marketing side. That sounded reasonable. They had overlapping interests after all. But the more I watched them work together, the more I realized there was something beneath the surface I couldn't reach. The first meeting at the gallery was casual, professional. Bianca, radiant as ever, moved through the space with the kind of confidence I had long admired. Her chestnut hair gleamed under the gallery lights, her dress elegant and poised. Dominic stood beside her, slightly taller, muscular, his blonde hair falling casually over his forehead. He leaned close when they examined the artwork, asking questions, giving suggestions. Every movement between them seemed fluid, natural, but there was a subtle intimacy that made my chest tighten. I tried to focus on my own observations, keeping a polite distance, smiling when I needed to. I reminded myself that Dominic was our friend, that Bianca was just being professional, that nothing was happening. And yet I noticed the small things, a hand brushing against another while pointing at a painting, the way their shoulders almost touched when adjusting a display, the soft laughs exchanged in low tones that weren't meant for anyone else. At one point, Bianca bent down to straighten a sculpture and Dominic stepped closer, offering support. Their hands touched, lingering a fraction longer than necessary. I could feel my stomach twist, a strange mixture of fear, jealousy, and helplessness. I wanted to speak, to intervene, but I didn't. I couldn't. As the hours passed, the event planning drew them closer. Their conversations shifted from purely professional to something more personal. Jokes about tastes in art, comments about mutual friends, observations about each other's mannerisms. Each word, each glance, each laugh seemed to build an invisible bridge between them, one I could see forming but couldn't step onto. I found myself retreating to the edge of the gallery, pretending to examine the lighting, pretending to take notes while they moved through the space together. There was a rhythm to it, a shared energy that made me feel simultaneously invisible and exposed. Every time their eyes met, every subtle touch, every soft laugh, I felt a small shock, a recognition that something beyond professionalism was taking root. When the meeting ended, Bianca lingered to discuss final details, Dominic staying close. They spoke in hushed tones, leaning toward each other over the paperwork, unaware of how the rest of us, or at least I, could see the tension between them. I tried to remain calm, to maintain composure, but inside a storm was brewing. The spark I had seen that night at dinner had grown into a small, flickering flame, and it was only a matter of time before it ignited fully. Driving home that night, I sat quietly beside Bianca, watching her smile at her phone as Dominic's name appeared on the screen. I told myself it was just professional. It's nothing, I repeated like a mantra, but the quiet electricity in the air between them, the way she laughed softly at his messages, told me otherwise. And I realized with a sinking certainty that the rhythm of our lives, the steady, predictable rhythm I had trusted for years, was beginning to shift. Something had started between Bianca and Dominic, and I, Adrian, had no idea how to stop it. The days after the gallery collaboration were different. Bianca came home with a lightness I hadn't seen in months, a soft glow in her eyes, a quiet excitement I couldn't reach. At first, I told myself it was just the satisfaction of a successful event, the joy of completing something she loved. But soon, I realized it wasn't just that. There was a rhythm forming between her and Dominic, one that didn't include me, and it was impossible to ignore. I noticed the little changes first. She lingered over her phone while preparing dinner, her laughter softer, more secretive. She seemed distracted during conversations, often drifting into thought, a small smile tugging at her lips for no apparent reason. Sometimes she would glance at a message and her eyes would light up, and I could see the subtle warmth directed at someone. I didn't need to know who to feel it. At home, I started to feel like a stranger. My usual passive patience, my ability to internalize things, became a kind of prison. I wanted to confront her, to demand honesty, but another part of me, the part that feared losing her completely, held me back. I began questioning myself constantly. Am I imagining this? Am I overreacting? Yet deep down, I knew the truth I couldn't face aloud. Bianca and Dominic were growing closer, inch by inch, moment by moment. Then came the first messages. Bianca told me it was about work, a question about the art event, Dominic's marketing ideas. I pretended not to notice. I told myself it was harmless, professional, a part of their overlapping interests. But I couldn't ignore the new pattern. The messages were longer, more frequent, and they came at odd hours. She would stay up late, phone in hand, eyes bright, a soft smile curling her lips. I lay in bed beside her, pretending to sleep, but my heart tightened with each notification. It wasn't just the messages. It was the rhythm of it all. The quiet vibration of her phone, the way she seemed to wait for his replies, the subtle glow in her eyes whenever a notification appeared. The more I tried to convince myself it was innocent, the more impossible it became. Every glance, every laugh, every brush of fingers I had witnessed over the past weeks now replayed in my mind with a sharper, more menacing clarity. I began to withdraw in ways I hadn't before. My attempts to speak, to joke, or to draw her attention failed silently. Conversations felt strained, my words empty. I would watch her from across the room, the tilt of her head as she read a message, the small laugh she stifled into the darkness, and my chest would tighten until I felt it in my throat. I was helpless, watching the person I loved slip into a connection I couldn't reach. And yet I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't leave. I stayed, passive, internalizing every small sign, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, it was nothing. But deep inside, a voice I couldn't ignore whispered a chilling truth. Bianca's attention was shifting, and the spark I had feared was growing into a flame I couldn't extinguish. Sleep became a ritual of avoidance. I would lie beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening for the quiet vibration of her phone. I imagined the words she typed, the tone she used, the warmth that wasn't mine. Every late-night message was a drumbeat in my chest, a rhythm of inevitability. I could feel our life, our marriage, beginning to unravel in ways I was powerless to stop. By the time I drifted into an uneasy sleep, it wasn't just jealousy that consumed me. It was certainty. A certainty that the safe, predictable world I had known was gone, quietly replaced by something I couldn't control, something I didn't understand, and something that would change everything. The invitation to Bianca's gallery opening had come weeks in advance, but the night itself felt charged, almost electric. The gallery was larger than usual, with polished wooden floors, bright spotlights highlighting the artwork, and a soft hum of conversation filling the space. Patrons, collectors, and friends mingled, but my attention kept drifting to the one person I didn't want to see her with. Dominic. Bianca was radiant, as she always was in public. Chestnut hair shining under the gallery lights, dress elegant yet understated, the kind of presence that made people look twice without realizing why. She moved through the crowd with a fluid confidence, introducing herself, gesturing at pieces she had curated, laughing lightly at compliments. But I couldn't help noticing how frequently her gaze flicked toward Dominic, who stood nearby, tall, broad-shouldered, a subtle ease in his posture that made him look as if he belonged everywhere. From the moment they began interacting, there was a rhythm to it, a silent choreography that excluded me. I forced myself to mingle with other guests, to pretend I was absorbed in the conversation. But every time their eyes met, I felt it like a punch to the chest. A small brush of fingers as she adjusted a sculpture, a lean toward each other over a placard. Their whispered comments meant only for one another. Each gesture was a thread weaving them closer together, leaving me on the outside. I tried to convince myself it was professional. They're just collaborating. They're just friends. Stop reading too much into it, but the way Dominic's hand lingered near hers as he explained something, the small, private laugh they shared, the tilt of her head toward him, it was intimate, too intimate for friendship. My chest tightened, my stomach roiled, and yet I could do nothing but watch. At one point, she bent slightly to adjust the lighting on a painting, and Dominic stepped closer, ostensibly to help. Their hands touched, fingers brushing in that dangerous, lingering way. And I felt an ache in my chest, a cold burn of helplessness. I wanted to pull her away, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I was paralyzed, trapped in my own passivity. As the evening progressed, they seemed to orbit each other effortlessly, drawing closer without words. I could hear snippets of their conversation, shared jokes, subtle teasing, soft murmurs, and I knew in a gut-deep certainty that the connection I had feared was no longer subtle. It existed, it was alive, and it didn't include me. Even when Bianca laughed at something I said, I could feel her attention still partially elsewhere, partially with him. Every glance in his direction, every soft touch, every private smile chipped away at the world I had trusted, the life I had thought secure. I realized that my presence, my marriage, was becoming background noise to a performance I didn't belong in. Driving home that night, I sat silently beside Bianca, pretending nothing had changed. She was animated, recounting compliments from the gallery visitors, but I noticed the way her hand lingered near her phone, likely a message from him, a flicker of the spark I had been trying to ignore. I told myself it was nothing. It's just work, just admiration, just friendship. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. And that night, lying awake alone, I understood the truth. The spark between Bianca and Dominic was no longer a fleeting moment, no longer an accident. It was real, tangible, and it was already reshaping our lives in ways I wasn't yet capable of stopping. I had always been passive, always internalized things, telling myself that trust and patience would preserve the life I had built. But that night, something inside me snapped. The quiet suspicion that had been simmering for weeks became unbearable. I couldn't sit in bed any longer, listening to the faint glow of her phone across the room, pretending it was innocent. I had to see, I had to know. Bianca was asleep, her breathing even and slow. I watched her for a moment, the chestnut hair spilling across the pillow, the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders, and a pang of something I couldn't name struck me. Love, yes, but also fear, betrayal, and a deep, gnawing despair. Slowly, quietly, I reached for her phone. The screen lit up immediately, as if anticipating me. I froze for a heartbeat, staring at the series of messages between her and Dominic. They weren't about work, not really. The first few texts were harmless, discussion of the gallery, planning an event. But then the tone shifted, comments about shared tastes, inside jokes that weren't shared with anyone else, laughter conveyed in words and emojis. I scrolled further. Longer paragraphs appeared, sent late at night, messages that made her smile, laugh softly in the dark. Words like, missed you today, wish you were here, I can't stop thinking about that moment, jumped off the screen and hit me like a fist to the chest. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was intimate, personal, electric. I read lines that suggested longing, admiration, desire. Every message, every reply built a bridge between them. A bridge I wasn't on, a bridge I couldn't cross. The realization hit me like cold water. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't harmless. It was something else. Something that had been quietly forming while I had been trying to convince myself nothing was happening. I felt sick. My hands trembled as I held the phone, unable to look away. There were plans to meet privately under the guise of checking the gallery, references to moments that had happened earlier that week. Conversations meant to deepen their connection without anyone else noticing. The affection was deliberate, tender, unmistakable. And then the cruelest part, the ease with which she responded. The words were playful, teasing, flirtatious, yet caring. It was the same smile she had shown me months ago, but now it belonged to him. The thought struck me sharply. The person I had loved, the person I had trusted for over a decade, was sharing that smile, that warmth, that intimacy with someone else. I put the phone down slowly, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, too empty. Everything I had believed about our life, our marriage, our future together, seemed fragile now, suspended by a thread I hadn't even noticed. I realized then that the spark I had glimpsed in the gallery, the tension I had tried to ignore, had grown into something undeniable. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay beside her, aware of her presence, yet feeling more alone than I had ever felt. The images of their messages, their words, their laughter, played in my mind over and over. A cold certainty settled in me. Our lives had already begun to shift, and I could no longer pretend otherwise. Bianca and Dominic were moving closer, and I was powerless to stop it. By the time dawn approached, I understood one thing clearly. The next steps wouldn't be about guessing or hoping. They would be about facing a truth I had long denied, that everything I had known, everything I had believed in, was about to be torn apart. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and deceptively calm, while my world felt anything but. I couldn't sleep, not after what I had seen on her phone, the messages that left no room for doubt. Bianca stirred beside me, her hair a tangled halo on the pillow, and for a moment, I thought I could pretend this was normal. But the ache in my chest refused silence. "Bianca," I said quietly, voice trembling but firm, "we need to talk." She blinked, pulling herself upright, stretching as if she had no idea what was coming. "About what?" she asked, her tone casual, dismissive even. I held her gaze, trying to summon the composure I had lost. "About Dominic, about the messages. I saw them." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "What messages?" she asked, voice rising slightly, an edge of irritation creeping in. "I don't know what you're talking about." I swallowed hard, the weight of betrayal pressing on me. "The messages, the ones from last night, the ones where you said you missed him, the ones where it's clear, Bianca. I saw everything." Her face went pale for a moment, then hardened. "You're imagining things. It's just work. You know that." "No," I said, my voice steadier now, sharper, the hurt cutting through any patience I had left. "It's not just work. I saw the way you talk to him, the way you write to him. I saw your words. I saw your heart. And it's not with me anymore." For a beat, she said nothing. The silence was heavy, suffocating, the kind that fills a room with the unspoken truth. Then she stood abruptly, pulling on her coat as if nothing mattered. I need to go," she said softly, avoiding my gaze. "Go? Where?" I asked, desperation creeping in. "Bianca, please, talk to me, explain. Don't just leave like this." She didn't answer. She walked to the door, paused, and for a fraction of a second, her eyes flicked toward me. A mixture of guilt, resolve, and something I couldn't name. And then she was gone, the door clicking softly behind her, leaving the apartment feeling hollow, abandoned, and painfully silent. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the emptiness pressing down on me. I knew where this was going, knew the truth that had been unfolding for weeks, and yet the reality was worse than I had imagined. The life I thought secure, the marriage I had cherished, was over, shattered quietly by messages, touches, and glances I had once tried to ignore. I needed answers, needed clarity, someone who could explain what had really happened. My mind went immediately to Camila. She had to know, or at least I had to speak to her. I picked up my phone, dialing the number I knew by heart. When she answered, her voice soft and sleepy, I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Camila," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though it trembled under the weight of anger and despair. "I need to see you. We need to talk. It's important." There was a pause on the other end, the kind that made me feel the urgency, the gravity of the situation. "Adrian, okay," she finally said, a hint of concern in her voice. "Where?" "Somewhere private, tonight." "Just you and me," I replied. I can't handle this alone." And with that, I hung up, staring at the empty apartment around me, the quiet that had replaced the life we had shared. I knew things were about to get messy. I knew the next hours, the next days would change everything. But I also knew one thing with certainty. I needed to understand, to find the truth in the chaos, and to face the storm head-on. Because Bianca had left, and nothing would ever be the same again. I found Camila at a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the chatter of other patrons faded into soft background noise. She was sitting at a corner table, holding a warm cup of coffee, her dark hair loosely falling around her face. When she looked up and saw me, her expression was a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Adrian," she said softly, "you sounded urgent on the phone. What's going on?" I hesitated, my throat tight. This wasn't easy. I had come here hoping to find someone who could explain the chaos that had suddenly overtaken my life. Someone who might understand. I stared at her, studying the way she held herself, calm but alert, and tried to find the words. "Did you notice anything with Dominic?" I asked carefully, testing the waters. She frowned, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. "Notice what?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Has he been distant? Cold? Different?" Her gaze dropped for a moment, as if recalling something. I thought, maybe it's me. I just had Theo 6 months ago. I thought he was tired, maybe frustrated. I assumed it was because of the baby, that things were just stressful. I didn't think it was anything else. I nodded, understanding her reasoning, but the weight of the truth made my chest ache. I had to tell her. She needed to know. And yet the thought of exposing Bianca's betrayal to someone else, to Dominic's wife, made me hesitate. I shifted in my chair, trying to find courage in the quiet hum of the cafe. "Camila," I began slowly, I saw messages between Bianca and Dominic." Her eyes widened, shock and confusion flashing across her face. She leaned back slightly, gripping her coffee cup as if it could anchor her to reality. What? What do you mean?" I swallowed hard. "Last night, I saw them on her phone. I didn't want to tell anyone, but you need to know. It's not just work. They've been close, more than friends." Camilla's hands trembled slightly as she set her cup down. I don't understand. What do you mean, more than friends?" I hesitated, the words bitter on my tongue. I didn't want to be the one to confirm her worst fears, didn't want to expose the betrayal in full. But the urgency in her eyes, the raw confusion, forced me to speak. "They're texting late at night, saying things you wouldn't say to a friend, things like they miss each other. I didn't want to believe it either, but I can't lie to you." She was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of what I had said. Her face went pale, her lips pressed together. "Oh my God," she whispered finally. I didn't realize. I thought it was just me, that he was tired or, I don't know. I didn't understand why you asked me to meet." I nodded, feeling the shared grief between us, a connection born from the chaos that had destroyed our friendships and marriages. "That's why," I said quietly. "I didn't want to tell you, but you deserve to know the truth. And I needed someone to understand what's happening." Camilla's eyes met mine, and in that gaze I felt something shift. Pain, yes, but also the faintest glimmer of understanding. A recognition that we were both caught in the same storm. She shook her head slowly, her voice soft but resolute. "We need to figure this out. For the kids, for ourselves. I need to know what to do." And in that moment, sitting across from her, in the quiet corner of the cafe, I realized something I hadn't admitted yet. I wasn't just seeking answers. I was seeking someone who could hold the truth with me, someone who could stand beside me as the world we knew collapsed. And somehow, despite everything, I felt that Camila might be that person. I returned home that evening with a heavy heart, the conversation with Camila still echoing in my mind. Every step toward the apartment felt like walking into the unknown. I had expected emptiness, maybe silence, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited. Bianca was there, standing in the middle of the living room, the soft light catching her chestnut hair, her posture tense, yet strangely resolute. I froze in the doorway, my stomach twisting as I took in her expression. One I hadn't seen before, not fully. It wasn't just guilt or hesitation or shame, it was certainty. "I have to tell you everything," she said softly, her voice almost shaking, but firm enough to break through the fog of my disbelief. I stepped inside, my throat tight, every instinct screaming at me to run, to scream, to grab her and demand an explanation. Instead, I stayed still, nodding, bracing myself for the words I already feared. "It happened," she began, eyes not meeting mine. "I didn't want it. I didn't plan it. But it happened by itself." I felt my chest tighten, a cold, twisting pain as I struggled to comprehend. "Happened? Bianca, what are you saying?" Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress, a nervous, almost fragile motion that contrasted sharply with the decisiveness in her words. I cheated on you, Adrian, with Dominic." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken, my hands trembling, as if I could hold onto something tangible to anchor myself. "When? How?" I managed, voice barely a whisper. "While we were preparing everything for the gallery," she admitted, finally looking at me. Her eyes glistened, but there was no attempt to soften the truth. We started talking, and it just happened. I didn't mean to, I didn't plan it, but it did." I sank onto the edge of the sofa, feeling the room spin around me. 8 years of marriage, over a decade together, everything I had trusted, built, and believed in, shattered in a single confession. "Adrian," she continued, taking a hesitant step closer, "my life. It's too calm, too predictable with you. You're too passive. I love you, but I need emotions. I need adrenaline. I need more." I stared at her, numb. My chest ached with a grief I couldn't name. I wanted to speak, to shout, to demand something. Anything. But the words lodged in my throat. Useless. Powerless. She was already gone in the ways that mattered. Her presence was here, but her heart had been claimed elsewhere. Before I could even process, my phone buzzed. I picked it up automatically, a dull sense of anticipation crawling over me. It was a message from Camila. "It's all true," it read. "Dominic told me everything. He didn't even wait for me to ask." I stared at the screen, the words cutting through me like ice. My mind raced. Bianca and Dominic. They had planned this together. They had shared glances, touches, messages, and now, after months of subtle buildup, they had consciously decided to be together. My wife and my friend. My world, already fractured, now completely collapsed. I dropped the phone onto the table, staring at the empty room. The quiet hum of the apartment mocked me. Bianca moved closer, but I didn't reach for her. I couldn't. The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the premeditated shift, the way everything had been orchestrated behind my back. She tried to speak, to explain further, to offer something, maybe justification, maybe remorse, but I couldn't hear it. My mind was a storm of disbelief, grief, and a hollow, aching clarity. They had chosen each other. I had been left behind. And in that moment, I understood something I had known but couldn't admit until now. Life with Bianca, calm, safe, familiar, had ended. Not by accident, not by chance, but by choice. And the people I had trusted the most had stepped into a life I was no longer part of. I sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on me, realizing that nothing would ever be the same. My marriage was over, my friendship fractured, and my life had shifted into a place I had never anticipated, where betrayal had rewritten all the rules. The days that followed Bianca's departure were a blur of numbness. I moved through the apartment like a ghost, each task mechanical, each thought heavy with the echo of betrayal. Evenings felt endless, the quiet of the rooms pressing in, a constant reminder that the life I had built, the comfort, the routine, the love I thought secure, was gone. Camila, I realized, was in far worse shape than I was. Her world hadn't just shifted, it had shattered around her, leaving her responsible for two small children. Livia, who had suddenly become more aware than a 7-year-old should be, and Theo, only 6 months old, needing constant care. The strength she had to summon each day to keep them safe, fed, and emotionally secure was monumental. I could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders carried a weight no one should have to bear alone. I reached out without much thought, almost instinctively. "Camila, let me help," I said one morning over a quiet phone call, my voice softer than usual. "Let me take Livia to school or watch Theo for an hour. You don't have to do everything by yourself." She hesitated, the pause long and hesitant, before replying, almost whispering, I don't want to trouble you." "It's not trouble," I said firmly. "I know what Dominic did. I know what Bianca did. We've both been left behind. Let me help. You don't have to carry this alone." And slowly she accepted. The first morning I went to her apartment, I carried Theo in my arms, feeling the small weight of him against my chest. Livia watched me cautiously, like I was a stranger intruding on a world she didn't fully understand. Camila stood by the doorway, clearly torn between relief and hesitation. "Thank you," she said softly, almost to herself. "I don't know what I'd do without this." Over the next few weeks, helping her became a ritual, a small but tangible way to reclaim something that had been lost. I made breakfast for Livia, helped Camila bathe Theo, read bedtime stories, and carried the small weight of responsibility for just a little while. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself. It wasn't the family I had wanted with Bianca, but it was something real, something grounding. And as we spent time together, the connection grew. Camila began to talk more, her voice softer, confiding frustrations, fears, and quiet moments of heartbreak. I listened, silently at first, then offering words of support, reassurance, and understanding. We shared long, quiet evenings while the children slept, finding in each other a kind of companionship neither of us had expected. Meanwhile, the world we had left behind moved on in glaring colors. Social media became a constant reminder. Photos of Bianca and Dominic together, smiling, laughing, always vibrant and seemingly happy. It burned like acid in my chest each time I scrolled past. The contrast between their public joy and our private devastation impossible to ignore. Camila didn't speak of it much, but I saw the strain, the quiet tension each time her phone buzzed with a notification from him. Through it all, something shifted between us. Shared grief became understanding. Understanding became companionship, and companionship began to feel like more. It wasn't sudden and it wasn't effortless. There were days of anger, of quiet frustration, of tears shed in silence. But slowly, imperceptibly, we began to lean on each other, creating a fragile, necessary bond in the wreckage of our former lives. And in those small, quiet moments, carrying Theo, helping Livia with homework, or simply sharing a cup of coffee while the city hummed outside, I realized that what was forming between us wasn't just mutual support. It was trust, it was connection, and whether I was ready to admit it or not, it was the beginning of something new. Evening had fallen over the city, the soft glow of streetlights spilling through Camila's kitchen window. I was holding Theo in my arms, rocking him gently while Camila washed the dishes. Her movements quiet, efficient, but not without a tension I could feel in the curve of her shoulders. The apartment was small and warm, filled with the faint scent of baby lotion and fresh bread from the day's breakfast. It was ordinary, domestic, and yet in this ordinary, something extraordinary had begun to stir. Camila glanced over at me, her dark eyes soft and tired. "He's heavy today," she said, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. I chuckled quietly, adjusting Theo in my arms. "He's always heavy when he wants attention," I said, feeling the faint warmth of connection, the small, gentle comfort of being needed. For a moment, we just looked at each other, The silence between us, neither awkward nor forced. It was filled instead with the shared understanding of what we had endured. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the upheaval of lives we had thought secure. And yet, beneath the grief, there was a strange tenderness, a quiet magnetism that neither of us could deny. "You know," I said softly, setting Theo down in the playpen, where he began to gurgle happily. "It's easier with you, talking, doing things together. I don't feel as alone." Her hands paused in the soapy water. She turned to me, and for the first time I saw it fully. The vulnerability, the exhaustion, but also the relief, the tiny flicker of hope. "I feel the same," she admitted. "It's been unbearable, Adrian. I've tried to be strong for the kids, but..." Her voice faltered, and she let out a small, shuddering sigh. "It's been impossible to handle all of this alone." I stepped closer, drawn by the honesty in her tone, by the trust she was offering without even realizing it. "You're not alone," I said, my voice low. "Not anymore." Our eyes met, holding in that quiet kitchen, filled with the faint hum of city life outside, and something unspoken passed between us. It wasn't sudden, not like a confession or a declaration. It was subtler than that, a recognition, a delicate, fragile acknowledgement that we had found each other in the chaos. I noticed the small gestures, the way she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the softness in her gaze, the way her hand lingered near the counter as if hesitant to retreat. I felt an unfamiliar stirring in my chest, a warmth that wasn't there before, a pull toward her that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I don't know how this is going to work," I said finally, breaking the tension with quiet honesty. "But I want to be here, for you, for the kids, for whatever this is between us." Her lips curved into a small, tentative smile. "I don't know either," she admitted, "but I think I want that too. I think we both need someone who understands." And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just grief that had brought us together. It was trust, shared pain, and the quiet spark of something more. Something tender, intimate, and slowly, impossibly, beginning to grow. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the lives unraveling and rebuilding within this small apartment. Inside, two people who had been left behind were discovering a fragile, urgent connection. One that promised warmth amid the cold aftermath of betrayal, and perhaps, eventually, love. The world outside didn't stop for heartbreak. Bianca and Dominic moved forward with a kind of boldness that made my chest tighten every time I saw it. Social media became a gallery of their new life together. Photos of laughter, dinners, art openings, perfectly curated weekends. Every post was a reminder that they had chosen each other deliberately, consciously, and without hesitation. Each image seemed to shout that the excitement and passion Bianca had claimed she needed was now theirs alone. Meanwhile, my life was quieter, smaller, filled with the hum of mundane reality. I was in Camila's apartment, helping Livia with homework, while Theo slept in the playpen, the gentle rise and fall of his chest a small comfort in the otherwise chaotic aftermath of betrayal. There were no glamorous parties, no art events, no curated social media posts. Just us, real, raw, human. Camila moved around the kitchen, preparing dinner, the soft scrape of utensils against the countertop grounding the moment in ordinary life. She paused to glance at me, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second that seemed to hold more than words could ever convey. "Thank you," she said softly, almost to herself, "for everything, for being here." I smiled faintly, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with romanticized passion and everything to do with connection. "You don't have to thank me," I said. We're in this together, Camila, and I'm not going anywhere." It was a quiet kind of intimacy, one built not on stolen glances or fleeting adrenaline, but on trust, shared grief, and the slow rebuilding of what had been broken. We laughed quietly at Livia's stubborn refusal to do her math homework. We exchanged small gestures of care, handing Theo his bottle, wiping up spills, offering a comforting word. And I realized something profound. This was real. It was imperfect, messy, exhausting, but it was ours. Scrolling briefly through my phone, I saw another post from Bianca and Dominic, a picture of the two of them laughing on a gallery balcony, champagne in hand, perfectly styled and flawless. I felt the familiar pang of loss, but it was no longer sharp and unbearable. I had my own life, my own connection, something deeper than a snapshot of happiness meant for public approval. Camila caught my glance and frowned, but then her lips curved into that faint, private smile that had become familiar in these weeks. "They look happy," she said softly. I nodded. Yes, they do. And that's okay. It's their life now. She reached for my hand instinctively, her touch light but grounding. I squeezed it gently, feeling the unspoken understanding between us. We had been left behind, yes, but in that leaving, we had found something else. Something patient, careful, and slowly growing. A bond built not on excitement or adrenaline, but on resilience, trust, and genuine care. The city outside moved on, the lights blinking and the cars humming, oblivious to the upheaval, to the betrayals, to the quiet rebirth of two lives intertwined. Inside, Camila and I shared a small, quiet dinner, Theo babbling softly in his high chair, Livia laughing over her math book, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. It wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, reminders of the lives we had lost, the friends who had betrayed us. But there was also warmth, closeness, and the unmistakable glimmer of something new. Something that belonged to us alone. And in the end, that mattered more than anything. Sitting quietly in Camila's apartment, I watched Theo doze in her arms and Livia draw on the table. The chaos of the past months, betrayal, heartbreak, shattered trust, feels distant now, like a storm that finally passed. Bianca and Dominic have their excitement, their adrenaline, their public smiles. But Camila and I, we have something quieter, steadier, something real. I always thought life with Bianca would last forever, that comfort and love were enough. I was wrong, but maybe I needed to lose that life to find this one. Messy, imperfect, but ours. I squeeze Camila's hand gently. She meets my eyes and I see the same thought mirrored back. We'll be okay. We'll figure this out, together. And for the first time in a long time, I believe it.